Hi focus friends. Look, I gotta be honest with you, ADHD is honestly super confusing to people that don't have it, and frankly, I don't blame them. I mean, look at these symptoms. Impulsiveness, disorganization, poor time management, problems focusing, difficulty multitasking, poor planning, low frustration tolerance, which means that we give up on things. I mean, these are symptoms that everybody experiences. So with neurotypicals, they experience all these symptoms as well. They overcome it, deal with it, and they get back on the horse and they lead effective lives. So when they see us ADDers not doing that stuff, they understandably conclude that we must be lazy, inconsiderate, that we don't care. Look, we can tell neurotypicals that the difference with ADDers is that the symptoms are much more persistent and severe than what they deal with, and that decades of research have shown differences in the neurological development of ADD brains, which account for a lot of the symptoms that are experienced. But the reality is that those are just intellectual explanations. What neurotypicals need is a way to imagine what it's like in the heads of us ADDers. And since their internal experience is so different, the closest we can get is to give them some analogies of the way that it feels like to have an ADD brain. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 3 analogies that I like that help explain the ADD experience. I'd love to know if you have other analogies that you found that have been great. If so, leave them for me and the other viewers in the comments below. And with that, let's get into them. The car radio analogy. Shout out to Reddit user Interesting Motives for this analogy. Imagine you're driving and you're trying to find a place you've never been to before. Ever turn down the radio or ask someone to be quiet for a second so you can figure out where you're going? That's what it's like for ADHD, except the car radio buttons are all broken. So when we try to turn down the volume or change the radio station to something a bit more relaxing, the radio has a mind of its own. It increases and then decreases the volume, and then increases, and then it changes stations, and it changes stations again. So that's one way to describe what it feels like inside an ADD brain. Applying this to ADD symptoms, you can see where it would be hard to focus, get easily distracted, might get lost. And we can squint and focus really hard through all that radio, but the same effort to get to that new place drains a lot more energy from us to do that than from a neurotypical. The Reddit user said that medication is like earmuffs that block out the sound. It doesn't change the erratic behavior of the radio, but it makes focusing and getting where we're trying to go more manageable. Analogy number 2. Shout out to Reddit user Una Unda for this great one. ADHD is like steering a sailboat instead of a powerboat. With a powerboat, you can go from point A to point B by pointing the wheel and pressing the gas. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. With a sailboat, it's more complicated. You can still get to point B, but you're more at the mercy of the weather. Also, to traverse that same distance from A to B requires more manual effort and energy, so you've got to tack and jibe and raise and lower sails and do all that to move from those 2 points. And finally, to traverse that same distance requires more tricks and skills and hacks. You need to understand the angle of the wind, know which way to put up the sails, when to put out the sheet, and do all sorts of different hacks to get from point A to point B. Medication and treatment are like installing motors to help you raise and lower the sail so that it's generally easier, and giving you a small little motor in the back so if there's absolutely no wind, you can still move forward. And finally, ADHD is not all bad. Likewise, there are some things like drifting along peacefully that sailboats are much better at than powerboats. And with that, we'll move on to analogy number 3. Trying to do things with ADD feels like working on a computer with a virus. This virus fills your desktop with all sorts of spam icons. While you're working and focusing in one program, it randomly opens up other programs and web web pages, and all this garbage eats up system bandwidth, and so your computer's sluggish and working on it is slow. That's what it feels like to do work with an ADD brain. Yes, we can X out and close all the pop-ups, and yes, we can flip back to the program we were originally working on. But the whole process takes longer, is extremely tiring, and some of the time we get pulled into the programs and web pages that get popped up in front of us. In terms of treatment, medication and other treatments help to partially remediate the computer virus. Those treatments can reduce the number of pop-ups, clean off some of the desktop, and free up some of the system bandwidth so the system isn't as bogged down and slow, but it's not perfect. So what do you think of these ADD analogies? Do you have a favorite one? Let me and the other viewers know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot of awesome stuff coming out. And finally, if you don't know my backstory about how 7 years ago I was broke, divorced, and earning just above minimum wage, I highly recommend that you check out that video of mine or one of the others on the channel. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye, focus friends.